Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of a TBC podcast with no real name yet. I'm TSW. If you have spent a long time in the TBC scene, maybe you've heard of me, maybe you've not. But anyway, I focus almost entirely on TBC, and this is Sam, my co-host, who also thoroughly enjoys a bit of the TBC. Isn't that right, Sam?
That is right. And regardless how long you've been playing TBC, you probably didn't hear from me.
Well, if you watched the Cargo's podcast a few weeks ago,
Yes, I was on the Druid episode. So apparently people linked to me as a feral Druid. But I've been thoroughly enjoying our last 6 months together on a private servers, and we played in the same guild as well in the past, I'd say about 4 years now,
yeah.
somewhere
So
around
on
that.
lots
Not
of
every private server we've been together, but that's a bit our connection.
yes, we've played
Um,
private servers together, and we're currently playing together on Atlantis now. The Atlantis Kazan.
yes. And so for the viewers, tease we.
Yes,
I mean, they all know you and what you do.
yes. Well,
Um,
maybe not, but yeah, maybe.
I think our experience is quite similar, although you've been devoted your time completely to one class and spec. I've been
Yes,
dabbling around a bit more, right?
which makes for such a good co-host. Like I'm happy that you wanted to do this with me because we were leveling together on a TBC private server, and I was streaming it, and we had a very good like social vibe. We get along very well, and yeah, we had some interesting conversations on stream. And part of doing this podcast is I've been wanting to do a podcast for ages, and because we have such a good like vibe together. But it's not quite yin and yang, but it's just two guys who are into TBC who get along, and whether it's in the format of a live stream or a podcast, I found it very interesting, and I think that other people will find it interesting as well.
Yeah, it's more beans and toast kind of thing, right?
Okay, inside jokes already. So yeah, whilst leveling, my go-to meal, or whenever I can't be bothered to like make food,
While
is
leveling, I like it.
beans on toast. Is it
It's
not whilst
always
leveling?
like that.
It's not always beans on toast, but apparently I've got a reputation for beans on toast.
You try out the odd pasta with minced beef.
Yeah,
That's pretty much the cycle.
Or
That's his dual spec in food.
it's like the cooking profession: 2 recipes and that's it. Beans on
Yes,
toast
mate.
requires 1 out of 300 cooking.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Anyway,
good.
let's
It's gamer food.
So for people like maybe like wondering like I know who TSW is, but why should I care about Sam? I mean you shouldn't really, but anyway, if you keep listening, I guess you do. Maybe that wasn't good. Anyway, I've been playing since the inception of WoW in Europe anyway, so 2005 that is, I think. And I think I played a WoW with a few breaks after Wrath of the Lich King, and then I did retail first 3 expansions plus now TBC for the past, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years, probably like 5 years now. Very briefly did Elysium vanilla server, but that's about it. I played about it almost everything. And I usually, when I try to do something, I really research my stuff and try to be the best I can be in that part of sense. And that's actually kind of interesting because I have been like top 50 guilds in Wrath of the Lich King kind of vibe, and now I'm like completely transitioning into the more of a dad gamer, although I'm not a dad yet, but the dad gaming schedule. So I feel like I can experience both sides now, which is kind of interesting as well.
We could maybe it'd be interesting to see if this podcast continues, how many podcast time until you do become a dad. That would be like the interesting. Like we've got
at least 9 months from now.
10 segments. One of them each week is Sam's child progression.
Yes, mate. He's level 2 now. He still can't eat his own food, but I guess
he's the size of a walnut.
Yes, mate.
Like there are these. Okay, is this getting too off topic? There are apps that people can use where you say like your due date or whatever, and it takes you back and it shows you the thing in the app.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah. Some friends of me were talking all the time, like, "Oh, he's the size of a grape now, size of a whatever now.
Yeah,
Like all that
size of a bus.
Let's hope not, because if that needs to come out, then
Exactly. Okay, moving on. That was a bit off topic, but it's the sort of thing where, do we want to do off-topic stuff or not? I think to start with, it should be TBC focused. So you've kind of said your experience. You raided Nax as well in original retail WoW as well.
I have. I did not clear it.
What a scrub! Oh my god, why are you even on here?
I think I was like 15 or 16 years old. Like 14 to 16 was a bit my classic thing. And at the moment that Nax came out, I was kind of tapped out of the game already because it felt like it was too much work for like too much hours. And I just want to, I mean, if you're 16, your attention is just all over the place, right?
Yeah.
So I think as a Resto Shaman, I cleared up to like 2 wings of Nax. It's kind of vaguely because I quit because my account got banned because I hired a Chinese leveler for me. And that obviously was not good. So yeah, I had to remake my account after that, and I think I tapped out for a while there. But that's the reason why I didn't really commit further into the Nax. But I guess that makes me like one of the few people who actually seen it, right? In retail.
Yeah, exactly. You're the top. I don't know what 0.1% or something who actually got into Nax in Classic.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, it didn't feel that way at all back then.
Yeah.
For me, it was just like I do what the guild tells me, right?
Yeah.
I had no fucking clue. Like I think I was in a guild, at least in Black and Lair and especially Multicore, who just did 40 man. That means 8 groups. That means you have 5 classes. Or how does that work? They just made groups like 5 priests is group 1, 5 warriors is group 2, 5 mages is group 3, and so on.
Yeah.
So it was pretty Papega. Looking back from it, but it was kind of cool because vaguely remember actually like this Torn Hunter was farming those Twilight texts in Silitus.
Yes.
Then I just came along for company. I have no idea what I was doing there.
Yeah.
All that stuff. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, I did. Did you do Nax?
No. The thing I like, one of the biggest compliments I had was from a guildie or someone who used to be a guildie and was in the stream or something. Like at some point they said, because I was talking about not playing Classic and only getting so far, like in middle of the road. Like I never killed Kel'Thas and Lady Vash in TBC even. And I remember one of the nice compliments I had was they were, well, not really a compliment, but I took it as a compliment. They were so surprised that I wasn't in any kind of like notable TBC guild because of how much, knowledge, I suppose you could say I have about TBC. But I think a lot of it comes down to because I didn't clear enough or what I wanted to, like, there was this level of mysticism. Like I'd see Troll Rogue with both Warglaves and I'm there in like my badge gear and maybe a bit of tier 5 if I'm lucky. And like, oh my god, it's so good. So that really drew me into TBC when it became an option, when I realized there were TBC servers.
Would you say that you not having it properly experienced the expansion as a sort of a RPG element, I haven't done it right completely 100% yet. That kind of drives you in.
Yeah, it's kind of like starting Pokemon with a different starter Pokemon. It's like although it's the same class that I played in the private server, but yeah, it's just a case of I mean, it really sucks the way that Blizzard has the expansions where you need to almost be playing from from the start, the inception of Classic WoW to actually play the game. And if you're playing expansion to expansion, that's fine because you're riding the wave. But if you're not in that kind of, it's not min-max culture, but it's the spearhead riding the wave of the expansions, that's fine because you see it all in the front row. But if you're coming late, like let's say for example you want to play World of Warcraft now, and you're not playing Classic, you're boosted or you're shot straight to the forefront of the most recent expansion. You can't really work your way through. Like in older expansions, you kind of worked your way through the different worlds and zones to make your way to end game. But now it's very much do what you want and you get to the end. So you kind of miss that whole, you miss Classic in that sense. You miss TBC, and that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah, but I share, like, when you mentioned that you didn't kill Kale and Vash.
Yeah.
That's for me the trigger that what drives me into TBC, besides it being a perfect mix of quality of life and just a good game, is for me like experiencing like Kale progression or Vash raid progression or Illidan raid progression. It feels fresh every time because I haven't been there yet. It's not nostalgic yet for me.
Yeah,
For me, it's
yeah.
almost like new content, and I can do that new content on with 9 different classes, and it'll be different every time.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where the first time we've killed Illidan multiple times on private servers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a case of, I'm not nostalgic from when I killed Illidan a year or two ago in progression. I'm still nostalgic from when I was 15 as well, to seeing people with Warglaives. It's kind of like, this is so cool, and I really enjoy doing it. It's not a case of, I don't feel like I'm rehashing the same thing I've done before. And also with WoW, it's very much a social game, so you're always doing it with different people, even if you're very lucky and you're doing it under the same guild name and the core might be similar or the same. There's always new people, there's always new struggles, people playing different classes, so it's always a bit different, but it's familiar enough that it's it's fun, exciting. And if you are again, I say lucky to be playing with the same people, because you're almost on a fast track to like success if you're playing with people that you have confidence in, or at least you know their strengths and weaknesses and can adapt to that going forward.
Absolutely, like that's why playing with people who have kited the stalkers at Vash,
Oh yeah,
that just like they completely negate the need of explaining a certain mechanic that like new people to the raid would take ages to learn,
yes,
or
yeah,
at least 10 tries to completely have down,
let's say,
and you just
yeah,
skip that 10 tries,
yeah, exactly. And if you're, I don't know, Vash's 200 attempts, you've just saved 10 wipes, and that's significant for progression. And also,
Absolutely.
it's just so comforting, and it makes the raid leading more streamline. It's just really nice overall. But again, we're playing on servers that are generally tuned higher as well than what we expect will be coming from Blizzard.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting thing to theorize about, what if Blizzard makes it more challenging, what they could do to make it more challenging. But it's, I guess we'll see. Hopefully we'll get a beta and be able to see what it's going to be like before launch. Because, I mean, fingers crossed, it's not going to be 6 hours worth of progression. It's going to be days, if not maybe weeks. But again, it would have to be brutally hard for it to be weeks of progression. And if it was brutally hard, they'd have to draw it back. They'd have to do like every month, make it easier, or else more casual guilds, more social guilds aren't going to be able to
well, if you look at Karazhan, the private server that we're playing right now, you have a lot of spectrum on there, right? You have XD, which is a very established guild, or like it's good skilled guild, I guess. They killed the new patch to 2.1 with tier 6 unlocking within 2 days, right?
About that, yeah.
But you still have some other guilds that trying to like keep together, but they're still progressing Vash, even if it's post 2.1 nerf,
Yeah.
which is probably sort of quite close to the version that we'll be getting in a TBC Classic, with all the information that's out there now at the moment. So I think there's like, even for the I wouldn't say the dad gamers, but the unexperienced TBC players, they will still have more meat on the bone playing TBC than Classic right now, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes TBC good as well. And for me also, it's so rewarding to get like a perfect BIS setup in TBC. It just feels great.
Setup in terms of class composition.
No, like for your own personal life.
Oh, so
if you
like
play a certain
social,
class,
like
get your BIS
confidence
together.
in players.
No, I mean
gear. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, gear progression. That feels, for some reason in TBC, it just hits the mark for me. It's not insanely hard in
yeah,
the
because
sense
the
that you need
progression's
to
hard. Like
grind iron foe or something, right?
yeah, no, I think you're
But
right because it's difficult. The
yeah,
gear makes more of an impact, whereas in classic, because you know, if you have world buffs, that negates any kind of gear requirement.
yeah.
That's
Anyway, now
really
that
fun.
people kind of know what we've been up to the past years, and WoW career wise, I wouldn't maybe call it a career, but I mean
It's
everybody
the
knows
best
what I'm
word to
talking about.
describe it, and it's cringy, but yeah,
Yes,
that's the word.
yes. Let's just make it career. Fuck it.
Okay,
Can we say? Can we swear in this
I think
podcast?
so. I think so.
Okay,
Let's
got it.
not make it a
Well,
focus, but we can
audience,
do.
you're aware now.
Kids, go to bed.
So what we for the listeners, what we gonna try to do in this podcast, I think, is um not do like a certain class focus, but we kind of want to have sort of our experience leading guilds, being in a guild, casually rating at the top end. We want to combine all those experiences in giving in explaining certain situations, like for example, what makes a player good, how can you evaluate that as a raid leader, um, for example, like how do you move from classic to TBC with your rating composition, like those kind of things we want to kind of delve into instead of just doing a class deep dive, you know. And we might do the deep dives, but we usually keep them we'll try to keep them shorter, and probably invite a guest we think really like um, would make you able to top perform on every boss in TBC, something like that,
Yeah,
you
it'd be
know.
fun to do like you know, how to ace SSC, how to like perform really well in SSC as a rogue or as a warrior, or how to heal SSC. Like, what are the critical like pinch points where it's like, ooh, that's critical to do this that other people might miss, and do more of a either do like an overview that's very broad or do a more refined specific thing. So for example, we can just say like, you know, what do you do as a resto shaman on Alar or something, and actually give a
Exactly.
scenario instead of a yeah, chain heal's really strong. It's the healing coefficient of this, and just that. Okay, well that's just
Yeah,
whatever.
and I,
But
as a rogue, I could be saying things like, save your cloak of shadows with your blade fury, so you can at Alardan don't have to run away from the first ad exploding, so you can just stay in and just cleave the maximum damage and then step out,
yeah,
something
it's
like
things
that,
like
right?
that where you know in a class guide that's not mentioned. You know, very few
Yeah,
class guides have encounter specific you know tactics.
yeah, and we like to, because we are always been on the PvE rating side of things, at least in our joint experience together. So you want to like give that experience to you guys, and make you essentially, I guess, a better player or better prepared at least, you know.
Yeah, I think that's
Um,
good.
would you let's take a topic right now,
Yeah,
TSV.
yeah, yeah.
What one? Which one you want to dive into today?
Well, we similar to what we. I mean, one that I've got written down is what makes a player good as a topic, which is similar to what we were talking about just then. We want to kind of
Sure,
do that.
let's go.
So it's like
Let's go.
easy things. Like another topic that we had in mind was if you're a trial in a guild or if you're an officer in a guild, needing to kind of decide whether or not this new person in the guild is worth promoting and having as a full-time raider. So we can kind of, I think we can maybe incorporate all those topics together. What makes a player good and how to identify a good player or a bad player. And one thing straight away is like buffing. So particularly like a mage using dampen magic, that's a critical spell that is very underused by a lot of mages, where if you just start dampening magic on the raid, you can really
I
impress
think we
most
can.
guilds.
I think we need to kind of break it down a little bit, right? Like what makes a player good? You can have that mechanically, you know.
Yes.
You can have a guy who, but I think for PvE wise, that would mainly play in PvP. But I mean, you have mechanically a thing. You have skill in the class specific,
Class
and then
knowledge, yeah.
yeah, and then applying that into your rating counters. So I guess kind of strategy wise, I would say maybe.
Something that you said earlier in your intro that I thought was interesting was it's not always what you're doing in game that is vital. So you can be talking strategies, you know, in like on on Discord or something after the raid and say, here are places that, I might be a really bad rogue in the guild and I might be dying or doing pathetic DPS, but if I'm able to bring in, add to the conversation of strategies, or maybe we could cleave these two mobs together, that would really help us transition into the next phase and do better damage as a raid. Or why are we only having one healer on this tank when they're really struggling? And maybe he could be hotted by a druid as well, the druid being a bit more mobile. Just little things like that, where it's not about your performance in the attempt, it's about you as a overall raider.
I think I think you can summarize that a bit as attitude towards what you're doing, right? If you have the attitude to get better, even if that means not personally you, but as a raid team, that is big as well, right?
Yeah. Also, reliability is a strong one, if not one.
That's a good one. Fourth one.
It's interesting because in 2021, you are almost expected in these high-end guilds to have 100% raid attendance, whereas years ago it was 90%. And I never played a top 10 guild back in the day, but I don't think that it's one of those, saying Kara, you would always do a break in Kara or do it in 2 days. Now Kara is a single day unless you're entering it in blues and greens, and then you will struggle to kill the encounters to actually clear the content in a day. But do you know what I mean? That kind of hardcore mentality, min-maxing culture has only got more and more impactful going and building into today.
Yeah. So we have mechanics, class knowledge, strategy, and then reliability. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think mechanically we can skip over really fast because there's not much to say.
With things like keybinds, if you're calling for, everyone, one thing I love in speedruns for Classic is you call bandage and you see the entire, more or less, the entire raid frame with the recently bandaged debuff. And it's so satisfying to make a call on Discord and everybody is in unison. That is so good. If you, don't have the keybind for first aid, your bandage, or you don't have Hellstone keybound, these are kind of mechanics where you can fall behind pretty quickly, particularly evident on a death log when you're dying over the course of 6 seconds and you've done nothing to help prevent that death.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. That's a good one. Or if now you mentioned macros, I think for example warlock team trying to put curses on every ad that has somewhat of a higher HP pool. I'm thinking hide rolls, I'm thinking Kale Toss, weapon phase, all just Kale Toss all together. Just having the target macros with curse of elements baked into it, kind of thing, that sets you up real good to be not held back by your mechanics, at least.
Yeah, and also to extend that point, you're a team in a 25-man raid, and if you're bringing 5 warlocks, you're a sub-team. You're the warlocks of that raid. Don't let one of your warlocks bring down, the mental image of all the warlocks in the raid. You don't want someone to be failing on the curses, and for, maybe a loot council member or raid leader or, just a member in the raid thinking, dude, our warlocks suck. If you're a warlock doing your job properly and a warlock is, not doing their job properly, help them out. Don't just, stand there using Shadowbolt. And we can get into this later as well as another topic, having the easy to play classes that don't have much in the way of mechanics, because they can be more
I know what you're
useful in the raid just than their damage.
Yeah.
But as a team, warlocks help each other warlocks.
Absolutely. So that's pretty much, I think, for at least for me. I don't know if you want to add something to mechanics.
Just raid awareness in general. I don't think it's much in the way of mechanics, but just being mindful of boss mechanics and your surroundings, boss timers, and making sure that you're not doing anything obviously stupid. Just being confident in the game.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I would say that the other things you mentioned before was more linked to strategy, so to speak, but maybe not. Then you have class knowledge. I mean, we could talk days about this. how well
Just being
you know stuff.
reliable. You know, like if I'm playing a new class or a new spec that I'm not familiar with, you should, you know, oh yeah, I get to play this new class. Okay, I get summoned to the dungeon. You know, maybe I've never played this spec before. Like, let's say I'm resto for the first time ever as a druid. I get summoned to the raid and I'm, you know, panicking and trying to do my best. And that raid is cleared, and then next week I'm playing resto druid again, and you kind of like fall into it, and all of a sudden you're a resto druid main. At what point do you just look at your spell book and go through every single spell one by one and just to see what each spell does? At what point do you look up and see what other druids are speccing, what they're prioritizing stat-wise, etc., etc.? You should basically be doing this as soon as possible. You know, maybe if you're getting summoned to a raid and you don't know what's going on, you know, whisper someone who has played Resto Druid and get the information as soon as possible, because you're not going to be an asset to the raid if you aren't able to fulfill your absolute baseline, you know, role in the guild, role in the
Absolutely.
raid.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, and it could be minor things, guys. Like, we could talk, like, you could, in the rest of druid sense, you're talking about this as if like a druid doesn't know he can stack life blooms up to 3 stacks, you know? Like, those are very core basics, but it could be other things like knowing when to intervene. The tank is the arms warrior just to save his life and keep progressing the kill, you know? Like, it could be those things for all we know.
Yeah.
That I think that's big, and I'm not sure how deeply you want to go into it now for class knowledge.
What we've
But
said so far
that's
is good.
like, you want to, if you're in a raider and you give or a raid leader or a guild leader, and you want to give a guy the warlock spot, you want that guy to really like almost be a sort of ambassador of warlocks, you know?
Yes. You
You
want to be,
you can't
yeah.
have the mage tell that warlock how he actually needs to play, you know? You don't really want that.
Yeah, like warlocks should help other warlocks, because who's got the most relevant information? Hopefully it's the warlocks. But again, your mage may have played warlock previously, but it's just a case of get the most relevant information that you need and run
Yeah.
with it, you know? Like people,
Absolutely.
everyone's there to share a common goal, you know? You're there to kill the boss together. And, you know, one thing that frustrates me is when you have really good players in the guild and you know that they're good players and they're just sat on Discord not talking, not contributing anything to the raid, and they're just there doing their damage or doing their healing, or, you know, most tanks will have to talk. But, you know, if you're doing the absolute minimum, like,
Yeah.
if you're a good player, you almost owe it to the raid to, you know, just, you know, whisper someone and say, yo, my life blooms are fading sometimes. Can you maybe look into that? And it takes very little effort to do that, but it can have such a big impact on the raid going forward. And like I was saying before with my Resto Druid analogy, so many players just will raid for 6 months having never looked at how they're playing or researching. They'll just fall into the spec and they'll, oh, okay, well, we managed to clear the raid the first time I played Resto Druid. So next week, I'm also going to be playing Resto Druid the same kind of way. And it's just clunky and, you know, it's whatever because, you know, again, some people like playing the game and exploring it themselves. We're not saying that you shouldn't be exploring the game and finding your feet yourself. That's a very valid way to play the game. But I think part of this podcast will just be looking at the game from a bit more of a min-maxy point of view. Although,
Yeah, and
all
the
respect
question
to
was,
people who play
what
like that.
what makes a player a great player, right? And I think if you're wondering that, you can find the game out yourself, but to really like define yourself as a great player, you probably need to research and like kickstart yourself a little bit, right?
I mean, even as like a top 1% player, you can still improve and look for ways to, because again,
Absolutely.
like the really good thing about WoW is you're relying on other people as well. So a very easy scenario is to talk about like tanking. You can be the best tank in the world, but if your healers aren't reliable or aren't pumping you with the right spells at the right time, you're going to fall flat. So it's a real,
Absolutely,
you know,
yeah.
give and take. And the same for healers. You know, you can't be healing people if they're stood in 5 all the time, or you can't be healing a tank if they're not, you know, gearing appropriately for the fight.
Yep.
Or if you're
Totally.
as a healer, you're not assigned to somebody. Like, say you're the Resto Druid and you're assigned to heal the warlocks, and it's like, yo, I can hot loads more people. I should at least be having hots on the tanks. You know, be informed yourself. So if you're assigned to the wrong position or the wrong targets, be able to have that conversation. Because again, I think a lot of people kind of rely solely on what the raid leader tells them. And, some raid leaders are really good, and that's great. If you've got a really good, confident raid leader who's very knowledgeable, bravo, good for them. And that's a really nice position to be in. But don't think that, just because you're assigned something that it's necessarily the best option. But at the same time, at some point you need to just kind of shut up and do your job. But again, it depends, and there can be a back and forth.
Yeah, I think we do that sometimes in our private servers at the moment, right? More strategy wise for killing the boss, but we like as an arms warrior, for example, like stupid stuff like checking uptime on demo shout. Checking when your haste is proccing and should you keep doing slam or not. As a warlock, a great sign of a player. To be honest, if I would be, let's say, I would be joining Slave Pens or Rogue, I'd be with a warlock. He needs to fear a target if you wanted to do that, right?
Yeah,
and
or make
you
the
see
jump.
that target moving to the other group, and he cursive recklessness it to stop the fear.
Yes, you don't even.
Like, holy shit! Yes, let's
For me,
go.
the bar's even lower. If you can summon people promptly and you have a load of soul shards, I don't care about your damage. If you can make us pull the next pack 30 seconds earlier, I love it. Like, if I'm calling for someone to be summoned and I see you in, /S or /raid, and you're announcing that you're summoning someone, and you've beaten our 4-member warlocks who have been in the guild for months, and the new guys coming in and out summoning them, that's a big plus in my eyes, regardless of their encounter performance on the bosses. Obviously that matters, and if they suck, they're out.
Yeah, sure.
But at the same time, it's a really good start.
But the thing is, would you take that warlock that does that 10% more damage, or do you want that warlock who's
10% more summons?
I mean, maybe, but I was gonna say who's gonna contribute to the raid killing it,
Yeah, I mean,
like if a raid leader is asking feedback, why did you guys die? And that guy responds within 5 seconds and naming it the issue and saying maybe we could do this as a sort of solution, and then adapt that. I would take that guy over the 10% more damage guy.
Yes. I mean, it depends 100%. What you're wiping to. If you're wiping consistently to enrages, you need to just bring whoever does the most damage. No questions asked. But
to be honest, it's a bad comparison, because I think that guy, the second guy who's gonna invest some time into essentially like having an attitude of being a better player, in 1 month time, he's probably gonna do 10% more damage as well eventually.
If all things are being equal, probably not. But it just depends. Like, if you want, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, if you're like a top 1% guild or top 0.1% guild, maybe you need to take the best individuals and have good management of the guild, and then you can make it work. But generally speaking, that's not tangible.
To me, that guy contributing to the raid tactics and solutions to find the best way to DPS for everybody, not just himself.
Yes, that's a big point.
That's going to be the better player for me personally.
Well, it depends, because then, well, if you're saying 10% more as a player versus if they're looking at the whole raid as a whole, because a whole raid as a whole, you can make bigger changes to make that 10% of an individual irrelevant.
Yeah, but maybe look at,
which is fine.
Let's take that example of like Lady Fosh, right?
Yes, yeah.
You have that I lost the name of the spell, to be honest. It's which kind of embarrassing, but the static thing that you have on yourself, which static shock. That 10% player pumper might just stand in its place and just kill a healer that way. Yeah. And maybe it doesn't happen in the first try you do it, but in the third or fourth try, it will happen.
Okay, but it depends what you're wiping to. If you're wiping to enrage, you kind of need to bring that 10% extra damage dealer and just have another 10 attempts until that doesn't happen and you kill it. But if you're dying because you're having people die, like your scenario with the healer dying to static, that's fine. Get that guy out and get the more.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? You can't determine that beforehand, kind of.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah, so it's an interesting like debate. But for me, like it's like how I value a player, like one of the top ones for sure is contributing on voice to finding the solution for everybody.
Yeah,
Um,
being a real team player.
yes, if a tank, like if somebody does something wrong, like dies or misses an interrupt or whatever, instead of just flaming the guy, which at some points might be you know, a good reaction to have. Um, I personally like more to really dive into the deadlock, for example, or see what happened via shadow play, and just seeing it happen and see, okay, that does that look suboptimal? Let's try to fix that.
Yeah.
And players contributing to that part are really good players in my eyes. And um, the other thing that I would value is having the knowledge and not just knowing, oh, Hydra spawns 4 ads every time you cross the line.
Yeah.
I mean, that's knowledge, but you can also have knowledge that kind of you're the ambassador and you're kind of the teacher of the role that you're playing. If you be the range DPS guy or something, or the caster DPS or something,
Yeah.
um, you could mention, if you take the example of a warlock, you can easily do 2 or 3 shadow bolts into hydras first and then start seeding or something, because then threat is no issue and you can just go all out.
Yeah.
While another warlock might see, oh, 4 guys, instant seed, like seed of corruption or something. Like those things would I value as well, like trying to make other people better. And we have a prime example in our guild right now, right? With like regarding to hunters. Um, or maybe even the more apparent issue one that we had in when we were progressing TK and we swapped prop paladins.
Yeah.
Not because the prop paladin currently was like a bad choice, not at all. We valued him as a good player, absolutely.
Yeah,
Then he
reliable.
had some issues trying to make the raid, so we swapped out. And then all of a sudden that came kind of around. I think it was on when we were progressing Alar at that point.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
all of a sudden we had no issues anymore with the birds on Alar.
The
And that
trash before Alar from Alar room, yeah.
Yeah, and just the birds in the Lar fight as well. That was way better.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's just and that's something that you wouldn't expect, but that is so much nicer. Like you really feel that difference. That a guy can just take a mechanic on his back and just like make you not think about it at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Also, just going back to when you're talking about warlocks,
Mm-hmm.
like communication is a massive thing, and even if you're not the top damaging warlock, if you're more approachable because you're more vocal and you've got a microphone, you're not afraid to use it, sort of thing, and you can have that conversation with the officers who maybe aren't warlocks. You can really have your opinion be heard by raid leaders, guild leaders, and management to say, whatever it is you want to say, whether you want to be doing a few shadow bolts before doing AoE to make sure you're not threat capped in the AoE or pulling aggro on AoE, because like warlocks get a bad rap when it comes to pulling aggro and these sort of things, and you're much more likely to be warlock class leader material if you're a consistent, well-informed, vocal warlock, irrespective of damage. Like,
Yeah.
I always think of damage as being so much more secondary to everything else, although it is really fun to just go all out and do as much damage as you can. And in an ideal world, that is the case.
And you mentioned something earlier, right? Which reminds me now of you saying it. Even if you are that warlock and you're thinking, dude, I'm just pressing Shadow Bolt. What the fuck are you talking about? And all of a sudden, I'm doing also like a Curse of Doom or Agony or Elements, whatever it is. And how the frick do I like outplay other warlocks that are also decent? So it's not going to be movement or number of Shadow Bolts. Well, fuck, you can be the guy that for your group swaps in the shamans for bloodlust or heroism, right?
Yeah.
You can be the guy. Oh, we're using CDs then, and then 2 minutes later again, and you're dragging that shaman into your group to lust. And the raid leader or whatever guy doesn't have to think about that, and you have the power to make bloodlust happen when it's good for you personally, and maybe also for the group. But having that power to like determine that probably shoots you up 10% in the damage meter just alone on that fact, right?
Yeah, it's really good. Like one thing, like I'm pretty sure that the druid's treants, if you spec into treants, can benefit from bloodlust and hero. So one thing I really hate is when you see like a druid get lust, and then they're popping trinkets and using treants again. If you happen to spec into treants, and it's like, well, those treants don't have lust, so it's like it's really clear.
Same with
vocal
Shadowfiend, right?
announcements. You're just sniping. Like you can literally, again, if you're looking at your cast bar, you have Shadowbolt cast and it's shot. Shadowbolt cast and it's shot. Bringing the Shaman lust and mid cast Shadowbolt. Like just or at the start of the next Shadowbolt, like you can. Again, it's very minor actually. Just like get in that extra, lust.
Yeah, but it's just like you need to move. And you don't.
Or you can be live tapping,
30 seconds.
Live tapping before that's the big one. Yeah,
exactly. You can have like your mana ready for it, or your Dark Rune and Mana Potion. No, you wouldn't take a Mana Potion, but your Dark Rune is also off cooldown, so you can get more mana, so you don't have to spend the global cooldown to tap, or just tap a few times before, so you can pump all the way through that Bloodlust.
And what I'm
not even sure if that's completely possible within a Bloodlust, but
if I was that Warlock, I'd have 2 life taps, a normal life tap and a life tap I would spam that would whisper all the other Warlocks. It would whisper them saying, Lust incoming, tap now, whilst it would also do a slash life tap for me. So I tap as normal, and then I'm like, okay, my cooldowns are off in 10 seconds. I'm going to spam a second macroed life tap, let all the other Warlocks know that they want to be tapping to full, and then Warlock in, Lust, and we burn our full mana bar all the way to 0 with trinkets and everyone's
destruction pots and everything.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And having that autonomy in a player would make me as a guild leader really value them, right?
Again, excuse me, like you were saying about the 10% extra Warlock, this individual who might be bad on the damage meter, he's just allowed all of your Warlocks to do probably 5% damage themselves. So you've already done 20% more damage from those 4 other Warlocks in your group, let's say, for argument's sake, to make the numbers easy. You've just doubled that damage deficit.
Yep. Absolutely. I'm just thinking what makes a good player as well. Maybe we should transition this into what the audience can do to make them be seen as a good player, right? What we just touched about. I mean, it's pretty much the same things, right? Like, be vocal, try to contribute to tactics or strategy of the boss. Come prepared, for sure. Have your freaking consumables ready, your scrolls, everything. Trying to set up the bloodlust timers. Try to be prepared already. Like the first try you come in, you already have a sort of a devised plan on when are you doing those lusts, right?
Yeah, get a VOD or something of the guild already doing the encounter if possible. Again, I always the number one thing I always mention is communication. Talk to the class leader or the raid leader, get an idea of what's going on. If there's someone else in the raid who shares your role, let's say you're a warlock or you're the third or fourth, third Resta Shaman or something, talk to the people, get an idea of what's going on. They can help you as you progress through the raid. Think about it as being like the analogy of treat it like a job. I know loads of people play WoW for fun, and ultimately that's why we're here. We want to have a good time, but at the same time, if you want to be pushing it that little bit extra, you have to take it more seriously and take responsibility for your actions. No one's going to necessarily be helping you on the way and be really forgiving when things go wrong, particularly if you're one of 2 trials for that spot in your guild and they only are gonna take one of you. I mean, you need to be thinking about ways to, be better than other people. And, if you get, say that, they kicked that other trial, sweet, now I'm a member. There's nothing stopping them from, if they're not set on you 100%, they could still be trialing new people. But also this comes into how difficult it is to kick people as well. Because if you've had someone in your guild for 3 months, in my experience, it has been difficult to kick people. It's like this guy, there's nothing necessarily bad about him, but, he's just not excelling in anything, in particular.
Yeah.
And then it's very awkward when the guild recruit macro goes out and it's like, oh, well, we're very full on warlocks in the guild and yet we're recruiting more warlocks. Like, that's got to make you a little bit nervous. And it just comes with the territory, unfortunately, as being in a higher end guild, just looking for a good, A good guild,
Yeah.
a guild that can kill stuff quickly.
And like TSV, we forgot to mention the most important thing
Yeah.
is listen to this podcast, right?
Yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
that's like
hopefully
to
we'll give you
me
some tips.
personally, that's absolutely a goal I have. Not because I regard myself as the best player, but just in general, make people better at TBC. I
Yeah, I mean, a
think,
lot of it's done outside of the raid. Like you have whatever a 4 hour
yeah,
raid, that's great, and hopefully you can perform really well. But you need to be whispering people before the encounter. You need to be making sure that you're managing expectations. This is something that is like in the work industry is like a massive thing. If you're selling
oh yeah,
somebody anything or buying anything, like who cares what it is or when it arrives, as long as it's a managed expectation. It can be delayed, it can be whatever, but if you sell someone an idea or a product as something that it's not, or it's not going to end up being that, that's a complete catastrophe. Whereas if you're able to tell someone that it's a 2 to 6 week lead time and it arrives in 5 weeks, that's okay. You've led them to believe that's the case. But if you tell someone it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then it ends up being 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, like that's a massive issue. And it's the same with WoW. Just and again, it goes a long way. All it takes is a few whispers, a couple of messages on Discord, just
yeah,
watching a VOD maybe, but again, a lot of people do really do the absolute minimum. Like even in the guilds that we're in, they'll turn up to the encounter and they'll be expected to hear the raid leader go over tactics and we pull, and they'll just
yeah.
learn as they go
But
along, which again is
if you take
fine,
that
but not in the top
approach,
guilds.
yeah, and if you take that approach as the one I think it would be the most punishing on, for example, an arcane mage,
Uh-huh.
you're gonna absolutely suck ass,
Particularly if it's a
like,
farm raid and you're competing with someone doing, let's say, 2k damage, like, and you're gonna be really struggling to keep up.
yeah, you need to whisper your feral druid, you need to whisper your rested druid, you need to whisper your balanced druid, like, yo, I kind of expect to be needing your innervate then, and then right, I'll be whispering you 10 seconds beforehand so you have time to do it. Um, like for me personally, I was tanking as feral druid, Kale Toss, the engineer, and after you kill him, you move to the platform where the weapons spawn, and you need to pick up the axe there, right? I mean,
Yep.
I know it's a very specific situation, but I think that makes it quite obvious. Is I was like kind of banking rage a little bit before, like just at the end of killing the engineer.
Yep.
But then our arcane mage wanted me to innovate him in that kind of phase,
Yeah,
running
just
through
before
like
the
through the
AoE
weapon.
starts. Yeah.
Exactly. And I like initially the first he didn't whisper me beforehand. I was kind of like, I think I was about 20, 30 rage, so I didn't do enough. Like, and I did enrage, to get more rage,
Yes.
like blood rage for
And
warrior.
reduces your armor.
And then he asked it, and I had to pop out a form, give it to him, and then I was sitting there with 10 rage.
Yeah.
And if some of the guys, or maybe even the prop paladin does a consecration, it takes twice before I can do a proper
Whirlwind in the
ability. So I
raid,
need
all the melees died.
exactly, like your try is over and you wipe, because that axe is like murdering people.
Yeah.
But those things, like having somebody tell you
Just
that is,
foresight and preparation,
yes, that
proactiveness.
is absolutely a very key thing. And by that, Tease, we might want to end
Are you running out of time?
this
Okay.
conversation about what makes a player great again. And
Oh,
I think
yeah.
for the audience, they need to know that we'll be diving into things raid specific, encounter specific, certain topics that makes guild leaders better manage their guild or expectations or raid compositions. All that we're going to talk about to make you feel more prepared for TBC, and hopefully also nice to listen to, right?
Yeah. So are you having to go off now, Sam, or are we just doing a new topic?
I mean, we can end the topic here and maybe take like a very small subject. I think I have time for 5 minutes more, so maybe we can take a Reddit post or something.
Sure. Do you have one in mind?
Um, yeah, but maybe for the audience to briefly give context. We like to have some sort of conversation like we just did now, and then sometimes break it up with a small conversation of what the community is talking about. and we now based ourselves on a subreddit called Classic WoW TBC.
There were multiple TBC subreddits. We love all TBC subreddits.
Yes, all of them.
But this is where we were this week.
Regard them all advertised by now, but I mean, there's a few that we have, and I think an interesting one we could keep quite close and close to the topic that we already discussed.
Yes.
I see a Reddit thread here called Hunter Responsibilities in TBC.
Head in.
I'll read the question. First of all, I never played a hunter, but always wanted to play one, so I'm highly considering one in Burning Crusade. Assuming classing Burning Crusade is a real thing, which looks like it is, I have a few questions regarding hunters. I know there are a one-button macro, have to do misdirection pulls, and occasionally using freezing trap for CC. Is there any other special responsibility they have in boss fights I should be aware of? As I don't recall them, they have to do any kiting at all in all raids or dungeons, but I would like to be fully informed ahead of time. I think that's an interesting question. And he already mentioned a few in his question, but tying that together with what makes a great hunter, I would say knowing the encounter and on when to MD, and threat is an actual thing in TBC, right? And it also ties into certain boss fights where, for example, for Void Reaver, Blood Boil, those are like pretty much fights built around threats. Void Reaver more than Blood Boil, right? But it's absolutely a thing, and absolutely. And the other thing I would mention, I think I want to broaden that scope to not just a boss fight, but just dungeons and like trash in general, right? I think if you're gonna be that hunter who's gonna talk to your other hunters in a separate channel to you MD this guy to that guy and like try to assign all that shit. I hope your raid leader also kind of does that. But you don't want your raid leader every pack you start, like let's say that you're in SSC, every pack a raid leader needs to announce what MDs are going to happen to which tanks and shit, and then one guy wasn't there because he was taking a bathroom break.
A lot of information.
You have to repeat, and the raid leader kind of forgets who he calls out. So
slows down the raid.
If you want to speed that up a little bit, I think you being the guy that facilitates that is something I would value highly in a hunter. Wouldn't you say, TSB?
Yes, and add-ons where you can track all of the hunters' MDs, so you can just make the call. And for example, if hunters are out of range or dead or whatever, our hunters currently have a hunter channel where they communicate. The tanks are welcome to join that channel so they can see in chat what are happening to the MDs. But for me, it's more about seeing the cooldowns. So having a separate add-on where you can see the 4 MDs, and you can just go down the list and say, whoever Hunter 1 is, MD me, MD second Hunter, MD me, and then third Hunter, MD Sam, fourth Hunter, also MD Sam. And it just...
Exactly.
It's frustrating, I can imagine, from a hunter's perspective, if you're stood there with MD available and... you're not 100% sure who to MD. Do I use my MD? But then, what if my MD is called for within the 2-minute cooldown and I don't have it? Am I seen as being a noob and, I've just burned my MD on someone else? You want to have it kind of assigned beforehand, or at least have the assignment ready when it's called and have that
absolutely
on the fly.
You want to be the guy that puts up Scorpion Sting right away, or at least have assignment with the other hunters about that. You want to be the guy who whispers your... I'm not sure who would be responsible for that in a raid, but I guess your Holy Paladin to do Judgment of Wisdom on the boss, so it stays on. Traps are kind of a given.
You say that, but there's a lot of hunters that don't trap.
That's
and if you're in a 5-man in particular, the hunters will just be there to do damage. They will not be thinking about CC. They will not be putting a first trap down, trapping, and then immediately putting a second trap down. They won't be line of sighting. They won't be MDing. They'll just be, oh, it's a wipe, feign death. Oh, and now they're back.
And I must say that even
that's
in the
it.
start of this server that we were playing, Karazhan, right?
Yeah.
We had very experienced hunters, and we have one guy who's absolutely, if you have that guy in your dungeons or your rogues, you can regard that hunter to be able to do polymorph,
Yeah,
right?
better than
It's
most
just,
mages. Yeah.
yes, it's as reliable, if not more.
Yeah.
And then you have the other hunter, which is regarded as a great player, and
Good
especially now I've
damage.
played months
Yeah.
with as well. And he would just say like, "Yo, I don't even try to trap because it's just unreliable." You know,
Yeah.
it's that kind. Like those both guys are skilled, but the other guy is just completely takes it.
Yeah, it's
trapping
interesting
to
how
another
one of them
level,
has
right?
damage as not their priority. Like as a hunter, you think, hunter, you got a pet, you shoot with range and you do damage. That's my priority. You know, pet damage, my damage, and I'm a ranged attacker, obviously. I don't want to be doing melee. And you have other hunters who are, you know, using their, you know, their crowd control and their other abilities as more of a focus.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think 5-man content is going to be really interesting in TBC, as long as it's not super face roll, because I do think that they're, you know, if they do things like, you know, speed runs in 5-mans or, you know, those kind of
Who
things.
knows? That was a thing during mop and shit, right?
Yeah. But like, you know, obviously I imagine paladin tanks will be very strong as soon as they can get gear. But what I think would also be interesting would be to have, you know, just filter off being any tank and just filter on warrior tank, and you can see who has the speed records for when it's a warrior tank taking charge. I think that would be interesting because you can do it the easy way, paladin tank, or you can do it, you know, a different way. Like let's say you could have like a speed run of a heroic or whatever with no healer or no tank, and just have a bit of flavor here and there. I don't think it'll be very popular, but I do think it's, you know, something to have fun with.
That would
increase
and
the longevity
absolutely
of the game instead of just Blackwing Lair speedruns and your guild is you know, rank 500 and you're a bit demoralized. It's annoying getting buffs. Well, and maybe you don't have 40 people who care about world buffs, and your guild is really struggling to stay together because you've set the bar really high and you don't all share the same common goal. So maybe there's only 5 or 10 of you who really want to be pushing hard, and you know, you have maybe Karazhan for that, Zul'Gurub, Zulaman for that, or the 5-man heroics for that, and that's interesting.
And tying that together with the question, right? Like hunter responsibilities. I think you have a great role to play there. What we said before, right?
Yeah, I mean, like in the speedruns, hunters are pulling in the 40-mans in classic. And
and they can even do a better job now, right? Yeah.
Like they don't even have MD and they're pulling. Like that's MD is so powerful. Yeah. Such a good ability.
Okay, so let's wrap it up for now. We'll
if anyone's got any names for the podcast suggestion, kind of like playing with a few. Don't
we
really
were thinking about Melee Don't Suck for that juicy warrior/rogue class players in classic WoW now.
Yeah,
that'd be nice. You were talking about Tea Time as a sort of reference to Rekful, but we were kind of doubting if we would want to like own that kind of thing.
Don't want to disrespect the memory.
Yeah, because it's absolutely with respect.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And I think we'll do the outro now, or do you want to do it later?
Do it now. It's all good. Right, thank you for watching. Any feedback at all, please put it in the comments. And we'll have more guests on. It won't just be 2 of us. Sometimes, I mean, if Sam's not available, I can maybe try and wing it with somebody else, or we can get a third guest in regularly, talk about something else. If you think that...
I kind of want to, like, instead of doing the deep dives in the class, I kind of want to just steal 30 minutes of, for example, if we were talking about Feral Druids, I would get XD's Feral Druid BGT in, right? And like just try to go, like we were talking about that encounter thing. What makes you the greatest Feral Druid at this encounter, and then throughout a whole Blood and Crusade, right? That you want to have guests for, right?
Yeah, or two of the same, because I'd be really interested to talk to another protection warrior and just vibe with them and share ideas, because it's not, there isn't one solution to rule them all. And it's really, as a learning tool, say if someone's a really good player and someone's a really bad player, you can have that conversation like, oh, I thought this was really good. Well, I prioritize this, but you prioritize that. That's really interesting, because I love inspecting other warriors. And even though, most of them aren't as good as me, it's interesting to see what they're gemming. They're gemming hit rating. That's interesting. I wouldn't gem hit rating in their gear, in their, if they're doing tier 4, whatever. in a million years, but it's interesting to see what the general player base and what Warriors at large are, trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And by that, just keep posted. Make sure that you drop your suggestions of questions that you would like us to tackle on in the comment section below, and then we'll catch you the next time. And maybe you can catch TSV live on a Twitch streaming, right, TSV?
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Yeah. It's all good.
All
Okay,
right.
thanks for watching, everyone.
Catch you next time, guys.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.